Header Footer Gallery is part of the New Media Caucus and is dedicated to promoting the creative output of our members by situating their work in thoughtfully curated exhibitions that take place across our entire web presence. New Media Caucus is an international nonprofit association formed to promote the development and understanding of new media art. We represent and serve artists, designers, practitioners, historians, theorists, educators, students, and scholars. Recognizing new media art to be inherently interdisciplinary, multimodal, and evolving, we support and advance a wide range of inquiry to catalyze further evolution of the field. The New Media Caucus is committed to extending and sustaining the diversity of our community, board, and membership, to promote an environment of equality, inclusion, and respect for difference. We prioritize inclusion as an ongoing collaborative process of growth that we continually address both within the caucus and in our field.
Welcome to the 20th episode of Header Footer Presents. I'm your host, Rene.
And I'm your co-host, Constanza.
And today we will be talking about the 112th CAA conference, where Constanza and I hosted a panel titled Technological Imaginaries, Imagine Futures, Utopian Visions, and Fabulations of Alternative Worlds, featuring art historian Claudia Peterson, curator Nima Ismailpour, and artist Jessica Fu. And now, Constanza will tell us about the CAA and the panel itself.
Hi, everyone. So the panel was actually something based on some research in my last chapter for my dissertation, but I wanted to expand it onto a panel that I envisioned for CAA. The topic of technological imaginaries is actually something that I borrowed from Sang-Hyun Kim and Sheila Jastanov's concept of socio-technical imaginaries. And they describe it as, quote, collectively imagined forms of social life and social order reflected in the design and fulfillment of nation-specific scientific and or technological projects. The thing is that while borrowing from this, I wanted to expand on the concept of technological imaginaries and how artists in particular are using technologies to envision different futures and different worlds and different ways of making these technological tools work for them. The other thing that I wanted to emphasize for this panel is also how to think through, for example, Afrofuturist aesthetics and ideals, Indian and African cosmologies, but also ecological perspectives that would help us, again, envision all these different futures for technology away from what we're accustomed to knowing right now, which is primarily something that is very techno-capitalist, to borrow a term from Villa, and something how technology is actually very much, geared towards just profit, efficiency, and capitalist ideals, right? So I think this panel and the artists and historians and curators that we invited were really essential into thinking about all these different ways of thinking about technology and its potentialities as well.
Well, yeah. So I actually put the book that you were talking about. I don't know you saw it, and now I'm going to share the call that we made for this. I also want to mention that this was done as part of New Media Caucus. We were sent in representation of the association, so it was like sort of extra special. For those who don't know, the CAA is this organization for art historians. I think, Connie, you can tell us a little bit more about them because you've been involved with them way longer than I have.
Yeah. So CAA is a conference that's called the College Association of Art, I think. And I first encountered CAA in 2019. I had my first sort of meeting with New Media Caucus, actually. And that's where I started participating with them. And it was all thanks to CAA as well. Normally CAA is a conference for art historians, but also other people within the field of art. And usually what you get is a mix between graduate students, professionals, more academics in the field as well, talking and discussing a whole bunch of different things about art and history through so many different contexts, which is really exciting when you get a chance to sort of inhabit this space where you get a lot of art historians talking about their specialities and niches, right? And to have them together in one big space is really cool. Um, and it consists of panels and different talks and other book fairs, which I enjoyed very much. Um, but that's essentially what CAA is actually.
So yeah, so this year the conference was held in Chicago, uh,
Hmm.
in the winter, which
The
was
winter.
it was a very brave choice, I have to say. We hit like -15 when Claudia Peterson decided to take a walk into the lake. Well, not into the lake, to the lake at like 3 in the morning, and we were freezing, but it was fun. Um, so it was held in Chicago. And it's held at the Hilton Hotel, which it must be said is a labyrinth. I had never been in a place that resembles the hotel from The Shining so much. It's insane how convoluted that building is. But anyhow, I think before we move on to the technological imaginaries, I kind of want to talk about like the conference itself, what we thought about it, and then we can shift back to the thing because I want to end with the important part.
Mhm.
Um, so first of all, what was your impression of well, not Chicago, but the venue, the everything that the conference itself?
Yeah, so in the past, I've been to the CAA conference in New York City, which I think is more adept for hosting a conference of that magnitude. Mainly the venue itself in Chicago was a little bit troublesome in the sense that it was so large that we didn't really get a chance to bump into people
Mm-hmm.
that we would have normally done in a smaller venue, right? The venue was just huge, enormous. Um, Other than that, I think that through the panels that we actually got to see, they were they were really interesting. And you definitely got to see different stages of different research from different people as well, right? So you can tell that some people were just starting their research and they wanted feedback. And I think this is a really nice place, venue for that, to get feedback on your research
Mm-hmm.
and, progress it into something else, right? There were some there were some standout panels, definitely. But overall, I think it was a good way to network with people, and get a chance to know others as well, and share research, and go to the book fair, which I'll keep reminding people that the book fair is amazing. Well, how about
Yeah.
you?
So the venue was the biggest problem. Like trying to find the lake rooms, like as they call them, was an adventure because it's in a different floor. It's like on the eighth floor, and it's like a place with actual people living, well, staying in at the hotel. So it was really
Mhm.
weird finding that place. And even with the size, the only person I found was when I was having a bit of like a I was feeling like overheated and all stressed, and it's the only time I ran into someone. So I was like, okay,
Um,
and it was in the cafeteria. It's such a weird thing, but yeah, I think people was like so hard. Even the panelists with us, like I never ran into them until the very day. So yeah, the
yeah,
venue is so it's too big for its own good. I think that's what
I
happened,
think so too. Yeah.
and it was very spread. That being said, we got this like 18th century hall for our presentation, which was really nice to have.
The Waldorf
Uh,
room, yeah, it was
yeah,
really
the Waldorf.
nice.
Yeah, that was really, really nice. The book fair, I did really enjoy it. The thing is, I I had never been to one place where you can actually be like, hey, I have this book and I want it published. And by the time I realized that that was a thing you could do, it was too late for me. So
Yeah.
that was a bit of a bummer. But yeah, so a plug for my thing. There's a menu I published. Well, actually, two. One is already you can actually buy it. The other one is free online. You can just Google my name and you'll find it. Menu for the creation, display of interactive media art. But I want to make it into an actual book. Anyhow, moving back, plug over. Um, well, Connie is also workshopping a book.
Yes, so I got a chance to talk to a couple of publishers. I'm trying to turn my dissertation into a manuscript for publication. So that was really exciting to actually get to talk to them and see if they're interested, And I definitely got some contacts, which I'm going to follow up. I just have to put in the work of getting the manuscript ready for that, right? but it was really exciting. So that went well.
Well, Little Bird told me that some very big publishers were interested. So, you know, fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers
Yeah,
crossed.
no,
Yeah.
there was talk about your book. The other thing about the book fair is I felt it was too small. And then talking to Nick Botringer, who's I don't think he knows how to pronounce his own name. Like he's told me, like I don't know. I just shift between pronunciations. But Nick mentioned that it used to be bigger, and that there
Hmm.
used to be things for makers, and that now there was only one. And yeah, there was one.
The
They
Blick
were
art
selling paints.
materials.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
Blick arts. Yeah.
Which I
Which
really
is a
found
shame.
interesting.
Yeah, that was a shame. I think the one in New York where I went to was much bigger, definitely, and there was more. But I wonder if it's just I don't know. I'm not sure what to think about it actually, but
I have
maybe
to wonder if. Sorry, go ahead.
no. Go ahead, go ahead. I'm thinking.
So I have to wonder if 50% of that whole mess was that it's in Chicago, which I have a feel like that's a weird city. Like honestly, like it's not like LA, it's not like New York, it's not like Miami. It's a very weird city where you go, you look at buildings and eat. That's about all. I'm pretty sure Chicagoans are gonna butcher me, but that's
Oh
the
yeah,
impression I got
definitely.
from being there at the time. And
Leave the
like,
comments on the bottom, please.
hey, we have to drive traffic somewhere somehow. I'm kidding. No, but that's the impression you get coming into the conference, and then like, I mean, we went to get like the deep dish bits with the academics and all that, which was good. But outside of that, it was kind of weird, you know. Like,
Yeah,
not to
I
say that
think
it's not a nice city.
yeah, no. I'm always going to be a New Yorker at heart, so that competition between Chicago and New York, I know who wins in that regard. But regardless of that, one of the nice things that he actually provided was access to the museums and galleries that we
Oh
could
yeah,
go to for free. So that was really great, actually. We got to see some good work
yeah.
um, across Chicago, so that was great. I really
Especially
appreciate it.
considering the prices, because it was
Yeah,
like
the price.
35, $45 to get in. That was insane.
It is, yeah, but that'll be another topic for another podcast. The
I could do a whole
accessibility
topic
of,
on that.
right? Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
it's the question of accessibility, and then why is New York so
Exactly.
big? Well, because it
Thank you.
takes a lot of money to go. Anyhow, yeah. So there was that, and then the panels themselves. I have thoughts. We got invaded by the Web3 bros. That's one thing I noticed. Like specifically the new media things. Like gender studies and all that was really great, but like the technological ones were more focused on Web3, which,
Hmm.
by the way, is going great with NFTs at minus 97% of their value. Nobody investing into virtual worlds and all these things. So it was kind of weird being there and hearing people talk about basically recreating Second Life, but with
Yeah.
an incredible processing budget, which would mean that nobody can access it.
No,
It was weird.
no, that comment that you just made is actually very true in the sense that I've heard it before, from so many other people that a lot of the work that is being done today is just not to diminish it or reduce it, but it is essentially Second Life. Um,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there is no, this is why history is important. Um, because otherwise, you completely gloss over something that was already done prior to this, right? Which I think is really important as well.
I yeah, no, I want to mention something. Second Life's still going, and look at how it
Yeah,
looks. Like, and this runs on most computers, and this is just off the box. Like, if you have a strong enough computer, this is how your game is going to look like. There's mods for graphics, and it can look so hyper realistic. So, if you're an artist and you want to work with virtual worlds, just work on Second Life or Minecraft or World of Warcraft or places that are already established. There's things you
yeah,
can do in all of those, and you don't need to reinvent the wheel every time you want to do something. Plus, this
exactly.
already has a
Exactly.
user base. So
Yeah,
what I'm saying is this is ridiculously complex. Look at this. They're playing Snow. bold thingy. And anyhow, and of course, there's a furry. Um, it's also a great place if you want to study subcultures. By the way, I should mention that. And there's even political activism in Second Life. So I want to invite people to not try to reinvent the wheel, go back to this instead of trying to find new ways to render human faces with emotion. Uh,
Yeah.
you can put googly eyes on a Roomba and people will emotionally attach to it. Just saying.
Yeah.
Anyhow, so that's, well, do you want to add something else?
No, no, no. Go ahead.
No? Okay. No, in terms of CAA itself and the conference.
I'm curious to see what it's going to look like in New York next year. I think it's next year that it's going to be
It
in New
is.
York.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I'm excited for that. And I want to see if I can compare my experience there from Chicago. I'm sure it'll be different just because New York has the Chicagoans are going to come after me. It's a little bit more integrated with its environment and surrounding buildings. And usually when they do it at the Hilton, I believe, in New York City,
Yes.
um, it's close by to the MoMA and other museums as well. So that's great. Great.
Yeah, totally. Actually, one of the things is, well, the submissions are open. I think they're open till March, which
Yeah.
hopefully means I will be able to submit something because I do
Yeah.
want to go. And then uh, we'll talk about this later, but probably my university will be able to pay for it. Finally.
Yeah. Yay.
uh, but yeah, so let's go back to the panel. So a little bit of background. Constanza decided, well, not decided, she proposed this panel.
Yeah.
And we got chosen over several others at CEA. Was submitted to a vote within the board members and everything. So first of all, great, because it's not just like, oh yeah, we'll just put Constanza. It was actually a discussion and a choosing. So it means that you rose to the top, and that should be celebrated. Anyhow,
Yeah, definitely.
and then I was the plus one. I was mostly support, except when
You
Constanza
played
lost her
support.
voice.
You play support. No, you actually did an enormous amount of work, right? Because most people maybe don't know the process. And I definitely encourage you to, if you're interested in CEA, apply for presenting at a panel or just apply for a panel itself, right? The creation of a panel. Process is somewhat simple. You propose an idea. You want to make sure that it is affiliated with one of the like societies of within the arts, right? So in our case, it was New Media Caucus. And yes, it was put to a vote, and there were some other submissions as well, but ours got chosen. Afterwards, what you do is that you get a lot of applications from artists, historians, curators who want to apply for your panel based on the description that you give it, right? And then from that, we actually had a lot of work to do, which we had to compile a list of the most successful applicants, right, for the panel. The ones that we thought would, that adhere to the ideas and the ideals, I should say, of the panel itself. And
Mhm.
so that took a long time, right? We had how many submissions? About 20 or
About
something?
20 or 15, I think.
Yeah, 15 or
It,
20.
it
So
was, yeah, it was big.
yeah, but that's also exciting, right? Because the fear
Oh,
is
yeah.
always that you're going to not get any applicants. Um, but that didn't happen. And so we had to sift through all of them and find the ones that best represented the ideas for the panel itself, but also the ones that would be diverse, not just in um, background, uh, but also in, for example, we had Nima Ismailpour, who's a curator based in Toronto right now.
Hmm.
Jessica Hu is an artist, also based in Toronto Metropolitan University. And Claudia Pedersen is in Wichita State University, but she's an art historian as well, um, who has presented, throughout everywhere, right? So it was really nice to have a mix between a seasoned art historian and also other ones that were just emerging, right? So that was also very intentional on our part as well.
Yeah, it was a diversity of voices in so many ways.
Yeah,
First of all, academically speaking, having an artist, an art historian, and a curator gives you three different perspectives on what it means, right?
I think that's
Also,
why
I
it
made this
was
really
so successful. Hmm?
I also made this really cool slideshow.
Yes, yes, you
Sorry,
did.
I'm proud of it. Uh, yeah, so it was interesting that we had all these people, and their panels were really interesting. For example, Nima said, "She who sees the unknown, reimagining the Jin figure in oddity and wonder." Then we had Data Collecting Universe, which is a piece by Jessica Fu. And finally, Futurism and Fabulations in Contemporary Latin American Art and Ecology, which was the one by Claudia Peterson. So those were the titles. I think it was really interesting also that we had people with diverse interests, diverse focuses, because like it was Middle East, it was Asia, specifically, well, Korea specifically,
Hong
and
Kong, I
then
believe. No,
Hong
Hong
Kong.
Kong.
Sorry, yeah, Hong Kong. Not my apologies. It was Hong Kong, and then Latin America itself, which well,
Yeah, so I think that made it very successful, and we had some really good feedback from people who went to see the panel itself.
mm,
I was very proud of it. I was proud of us, right, and the work that we put into this. So I'm excited to see what next year, what you're going to propose, and I'll be your plus one.
yeah, we'll see if I can actually propose something. But yeah, and it's just politics and things about my work itself, which is a little bit more technical. But yeah, so coming to this, actually, one of the funny stories is at the beginning, like one of the biggest fears you have as a panelist or someone that runs a panel is that the thing ends and you ask questions and there's a void of silence. Everybody,
Yeah.
they all look like deers on headlights. They're like, they panic.
Yeah.
So one of the things we were panicking about ourselves was to deal with was the questions and having to come up with them, right? We were taking notes, we were making sure everything was like everybody had at least one question, one interesting question about their work. But fortunately, I the only question I asked was the Nima question about VR, about what he thought about VR as a means of embodiment and trying to create empathy for different groups. And actually, that in that one, they gave really good answers because they all of them like had an answer to that one. Like it was Nima, and then Claudia jumped in, and then Jessica, and that kept happening with the panelists. Well, not with the audience asking questions. So that was really good. And then from there, just people started like asking people. I think they all got asked questions as well. So
I
that
think
was
so
really good.
too. That was
Uh,
exciting. There was a fantastic question from someone in
yes.
the audience, and I loved it. They asked the question about how do their works and their ideas actually relate to possibly spirituality,
Hmm.
right? That was a fantastic question, and it really got people thinking about also what does it mean for it to be technological imaginaries? Like, is there room for spirituality in these ideals that we have, which is, I feel, somewhat divorced from our usual day-to-day lives and
Mm.
also alienated in some sense. I don't know, I get that impression. But it was really nice to see bringing back all these, how do you say it? These ideas, right, that are very profound to various cultures. Speaking of which they all talked about different cultures as well,
Yeah.
and how that related to that too. So that was really good.
Yeah, it was really interesting, especially that question, because later I heard that that same person found Claudia somewhere, and they
Hmm.
just started talking about like, well, they picked up the question, which means a lot because it means that it wasn't just like something. I mean, you could tell from the second this person asked the question that it was going to be important, but the fact that they followed through and they actually had the two of them had a conversation later like separate
Yeah,
from the panel, that's really validating of the panel itself.
yeah, definitely.
I think it was one of the best panels there.
But we might be biased a little bit.
No,
No,
no, no,
I
no, I don't know what you're talking about. This
no,
is objective. No, I'm kidding.
no, that's great. But honestly, the follow through, the the best part for me of panels, and I've been to a few now, and conferences, is the conversations that you have over coffee or whatever it is at the cafeteria, wherever that is,
Yeah.
about the panel that you just saw, or, if you have additional questions. I think that's very important and also very necessary because you feel validated on the one hand, right? But, for most people who have to process so much time, so much research in, what was it, like 90 minutes or something that our panel was scheduled for?
It was an hour and a
No,
half. Yeah.
less, 90 minutes. Yeah. Um, people take time to process everything they've learned and seen, right? And so it makes sense for people to carry on that conversation afterwards, which is, the one of the best feelings that you get.
Yeah, definitely. And about those 90 minutes, this is more of a lesson to everyone. But first of all, about the logistics of it all. Well, one of the things that
And
we did is originally we wanted to have what, 4 people or five?
4 people. No,
Yeah,
four.
4 people. Yeah, we wanted to have 4 people, but then one of the mistakes that everybody makes is, oh, they'll each speak 20 minutes, so that's 100 minutes, and then you have what is it? So it's 90, and it's it's 80, so 10 minutes for questions, right?
Yeah.
But the thing everybody forgets about that is that you need time for people to fumble,
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
Hey, can you turn on the lights? Can you turn off the lights? Can you, oh, my panel is not loading, my presentation is not loading, all
Sound
those
check.
things. Yeah, all of those things. And one of the things we did is we accounted for that. And
Yeah.
it's ironic because CAA had the system where you had everything loaded into their own laptops, meaning that there was no fumbling with cables and, oh, my computer's not sending me image, blah, blah, blah. That was a great help. But even
Yeah.
if we didn't have it, we would have had the time to accommodate those things. And most presentations would have been they would have run a little bit longer, but we would still have had time for questions. The
Yeah.
other thing is, because we had that time accounted for as fumbling, when they went over time, because everybody goes over time, it's such a
Yeah.
thing. When
It's
they
just
went
what
over
happens.
time, and we were timing them and being like, hey, you have 5 minutes, but they didn't know that they had 5 extra minutes, and they all used them
Hmm.
close to. So that was really good because it meant that everything was on time. And
Yeah.
then we had the time for the questions, which, okay, if nobody had asked questions, it would have been terrifying because we would have to have like a third of the presentation empty. But because we planned for us asking questions, I don't think we would have run into that problem either. So
No. Hmm.
the
I think
lesson
that
is
was
account.
really, yeah, exactly. And for those of you who are going to pitch a conference panel or a paper, more specifically a panel, a lot time for fumbling. That is the lesson to be learned right now for fumbling and all of these. Yeah, because it would have been great to have 4 people, but I think the 3 people that we chose were
Mm-hmm.
excellent
Yeah.
and yeah, they just worked together really well and we had
Yeah,
enough
yeah.
time.
The other thing is when we were doing the selection, this happened. Someone backed out.
Yeah.
So you also need to have time to fix those things because eventually, like sometimes you end up with fewer people. So have like your main like selection, and then have some that are like, hey, you know what? We would like to extend that invitation because we reconsidered your panel or something like that. Uh, Obviously, be respectful and all that, right? But you do have to have like a plan B in case someone drops or things like that. That made the
Hmm.
panel much more smooth in how it
Yeah.
ran and how it worked out. And I think it's the reason that it felt more put together than some of
Than
the
some of the
things.
other ones we've seen. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
definitely. And
And
that's a
people
really
were
good,
saying they enjoyed it. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no. I was just gonna say, like, the whole timing situation and allotting for all of these different things, that was definitely thanks to you. There was allotting for all this. So yeah, see, teamwork makes the dream work, right? Is that how you say it? Yeah, I think
Oh
so.
my god, that's so cheesy, but yes, it is. Yeah, no, it actually it's the creative part, right? Like expect the worst, no, plan for the worst, but expect the best.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing I've noticed. Like a lot of people do, like they're like, "Oh, we're gonna do this, and it's gonna look like this, and it's gonna be this," and it's like, no, I'm always planning for disaster. I'm just hoping it never happens.
Of
So
course, yeah.
if something bad happens, I already know what to do, and I'm not panicking about it later. Like, oh god, someone dropped out, or oh my god, such and such thing, we didn't account for time, or oh, we didn't account for this. So that's another lesson: is plan for the worst but expect the best,
Yeah, for sure.
and it'll make you saner. Trust me, especially if you work with living artists. Um, anyhow, so I think what I ask you now is, how do you see these technological imaginaries, imagined futures, utopian visions, and fabulations of alternative worlds? Like, what is your approach to this? Your personal approach?
My approach to this and what hopefully will become my book project, or I guess it's already ongoing, um, is how do I put this? The general idea for it is thinking of ways in which artists are subverting the technologies that we use to think about potentialities and possibilities away from, the established Western canon, right? And I think that was also important to write in the abstract and the call itself, right? We were specifically looking for scholars who are envisioning these possibilities and ruptures away from the global north paradigm, right? That to me was really important as well. Um, because there always tends to be like a Western hegemony for, techno corporatism, right? And all of these different
Yes.
things. So yeah, that's something I'm gonna looking at, I should say, for my project and expect a book project sometime soon. If all
Yes,
goes well.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll put the call or the description of the panel on the screen so you can read it. Now, in my case, technological imaginaries and all these things. Um, I do believe that the best way is practice, the practice of it. Like talk about it, do it, but more importantly, be honest about it. Because one of the things that you can sometimes see a lot of in new media art is this new toy mentality, right?
Oh yeah.
Like,
The
oh,
promise
we
of
don't
the
do,
lure.
yeah, exactly. So it never gives time for others to experiment because by the time they're experimenting, it's gone. So, for example, net art. No, well, not really many people do net art nowadays, but a lot of people who are not in the West because they're taking like sometimes things take a longer time to get to us, or sometimes it's like we don't have the access, the financial access to these things, right? So,
Exactly.
or we're just learning about it because it's new people. Like if you're a new artist, like if you're in like your 20s and you're like just found out about net art and you're excited about, I don't know, breaking WordPress, for example, because that's the other thing. Like net art and specifically was made breaking HTML, but there's nothing in net art that says you can't try and break WordPress or Facebook or whatever. But it's not
Mm-hmm.
done because net art is so 90s, and that's closing a lot of what I don't know if this is a good term to use, but it's called design space. When you're a designer, there's this thing called design space, and it's like how wide you can like expand and experiment on things. So by removing net art because it's passe, you're removing design space. It's a little bit capitalistic, but it still applies in a way. Um, and so it applies to everything. And we have seen how it kind of sort of revives itself sometimes. For example, the 90s was big on VR when it was like refrigerator sized computers, but nowadays it's these tiny little headsets, right? But at the same time, is how much are we replicating the 90s? How much are we replicating things that are like capitalism, like we were talking about? Like, can you really be trying to break like westernized perspectives on technology if you're creating Web3? Can you do it if you're talking about
Mm-hmm.
virtual worlds? Where and I think this is one of the things Nima was talking about, is like embodiment of certain things through VR, which is a better approach, I believe. One of the things that VR has is the ability to make you and I'm being literal here, at least in my experience, inhabiting other people's bodies. Because if you have a good enough, and good enough, I mean like a Quest VR, which is $300. The Meta Quest, like the Meta Quest 2
Yeah,
must be about $300 or something, which is expensive for most people, let's face it. But they have access to it, whereas within a museum, school, or whatever, you can download these experiences where, because of the body tracking it has, you can actually see your hands move, and they're not your hands. They're
mm,
somebody else's hands. You can see a body that is not yours, and that gives you a completely different perspective that in some ways, for example, can help you understand the different gender um, roles, gender expressions, all these things, and try to understand them by being in them, right? We've already
mhm.
seen these things, not with gender, but with violence. There was this very controversial VR piece where,
At the Whitney,
yeah, the one where
and
you
it's
see someone getting
yeah,
assaulted. Yeah, exactly.
attacked, assaulted. Yeah.
Yeah, so that makes you question, because a lot of the problems we have nowadays with these disconnected societies that we have is that nobody feels empathy through the screen.
Mhm.
And ironically, VR is one of the few ones that can sorta, I'm not saying it's a substitute, but it sorta can help. So
Definitely.
as different, like as Latin Americans, and I don't like the label Latino, but like Latin Americans, and that includes, yes, people in the US, we can and specifically, like you could say, well, as a Mexican, I can help you understand how I feel when I walk down the street. Because, and
Yeah.
you've been in Mexico, you've lived in Canada, you lived in New York. You can feel the difference in how we walk, right? Like I can see how you move, and it's different than how I move in these spaces. You have a more, like when you walk, you're not looking at everyone.
Hmm.
And that's a very Mexican thing, because you have to be careful of who's approaching you, from where they're approaching you, where you can move, where you
Vigilant.
can't move, where can you run out to. And those things kind of help. And it's not about making Mexico seem dangerous or anything. It's just the nature of the place, the space where we live, makes you behave and inhabit spaces in a different way. And even when I'm in the US, I am doing it because it's a thing. So it
Yeah.
can help you understand these things, see how it changes. Um, it can help you understand how someone who sees something as ritual is a ritual rather than just
Hmm.
an object, which is something I've seen Westerners struggle a lot with, particularly living objects. They really struggle with them, even though they have living objects, but they're generally fiction. So they can accept them in fiction, but not in reality, which is kind of confusing for me. But yeah, so I think that's what technological imaginaries are for me, like allowing technology to, and allowing people to use technology, even if it's passe or out of fashion, to explore these things. Because one of the things is that this technophilia that we have is very Western. It's because of the cult of the new. So that
Yes.
in itself, rescuing older forms of new media art, like messing around with TVs, like cathode ray TVs, or
Yeah.
messing around with radio, messing around with all these things, is a way to break from the Western perspective, I think.
Yeah. There's so much research that is ongoing, especially in the countries in Africa and also
Mm-hmm.
Asian countries as well. And it's phenomenal. So I always definitely encourage people to think and see these perspectives as a way of being because, at the end of the day, I think about ontology a lot, and it definitely challenges us to think about different ways of being and existing in the world through these technologies, right? And that could be like a whole other subject for another podcast as well. But yeah, so seek out these different perspectives
Yeah.
because you'll become much more knowledgeable and much more humbled, right? But also you just get more perspective,
Yeah.
right? You get more perspective about how different people are employing these technologies to suit their ends, especially as Western technologies. um, and technological systems, I should say, oppress, you know, underrepresented people, minority groups, things like that, who are no longer minority groups, by the way.
Yeah.
Um, and seeing how they sort of rescue these technologies for different ends is really exciting. And that's something that I have been focusing on for my research as well.
And that's also a really interesting thing because the only reason we are minorities is because we are seeing through things through a Western lens.
Exactly. Exactly.
Because there's like billions of Chinese people, there's billions of Indians, there's many more Latin Americans than there are Americans, and specifically white Americans. But white Americans have become, and specifically white Americans have become the default, right?
Yes. Hmm.
And by white Americans, I am including immigrants like Elon Musk, for example. Elon Musk sells himself as this all-American hero, but he's South African, right? Uh, just a little parenthesis. They just found out of an interview with his brother and him, and where they admit that they were illegal immigrants in the U.S. And
Mm.
now that he's gone on the far right pipeline and he's promoting those ideas, kind of ironic. Anyhow, back to the thing. But yeah, so even that of seeing ourselves as the minority has to change because that's a very Western perspective of things.
Exactly.
And the sooner we realize, this is the same thing as the worker revolution, right? Like the moment you realize that you're more than that, the perspective changes. And this is not
Hmm.
about violence or anything like that, but realizing that our voices, we're more. We have more voices. That's it. Um,
Yeah.
and they deserve to be heard, not ignored just because of the color. Anyhow, now, anything else you want to add?
Nope. No, we're good.
Okay, so now it's announcement times. Do you have any announcements to make?
No, but you should talk about your announcement.
All right, so I am moving to Germany. I have been hired. Well, I'm still waiting for my visa, but I mean, paperwork.
Yeah.
But I've been admitted at the Karlsruhe Institute for Technology to do a postdoctorate. I'm working also alongside with ZKM, which is the Center for Arts and Media. Where I'll be working on researching specifically how to collect. It's a complicated thing because it doesn't work in English translation, but hard to collect art, new media art.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
that includes Latin American art specifically. And
Mhm.
one of the things is that hard to collect has so many meanings. So part of the research is it hard to collect because of it's physically hard to collect? Is it hard to collect because the people who create these artworks have no access to places that collect them? So it's going to be it's an ongoing 4-year program. We'll see how that goes. I should be there. So we're already in March, right? Yeah. So I
Yeah.
should be there by the end of the month, hopefully, fingers crossed, or the mid April. So the
Yay, this is so
podcast might take.
exciting.
Yeah, it's super exciting. What does that mean to the podcast? That we may be a little bit delayed. Maybe. So this March one first, we're recording on March 1st. So it'll be online probably on Sunday. So today's Friday. This is supposed to be February, but because of me doing migration stuff, Connie having no voice for a few days, and so many other things, it was delayed. But probably we'll have one more in March, and then April might not happen because anybody that's moved like from one side of the city to another one knows how difficult that is. Now imagine the whole country. So,
Yeah.
or maybe we'll just have you do one on your own. So there's that. And then there's also, we have a new exhibition up. Let
Yeah,
me
that's
pull
also
it
very
up.
exciting. Yes.
Where is it? Here it is. So if you go to newmediacaucus.org, you know where we always are, where you should be. Now we have coded meditations. This is an exhibition by Jason Ting. This time, I have to mention I love the typography I used. I pulled miracles because we were talking about net art and hacking WordPress, and I did manage that because this is the New Media Caucus webpage. but I managed to get rid of the little headers here and the navigation menus and the banners and everything. It's like completely hacked together, which is a really cool thing. So it's by Jason Ting, and it's about his interpretation of meditation and light. So it's generative artwork, and well, it starts with a few YouTube videos, but then we move to these ones. These ones are the ones that are like generative. Is it moving? Yeah, it is moving.
Yeah,
So
it
you can
is.
see how they start to migrate and create these very interesting color patterns. One thing I should mention is here it looks logical, but if you, well, let's run it. The first movement here starts like this, but when it ends, I'm not going to show the whole thing. It ends up with this one, which shares some of the colors in this one, which shares some of the patterns in this one, and so on and so forth. So there's this progression through the thing that I really,
Yeah.
it took more time than it sounds, to be honest, but it made for a very consistent viewing experience. And the whole idea of this is very similar. I also wanted it to be like as full screen as possible, as you can see here, which is really rewarding in terms of web design. One of the things I wanted is to recreate that feeling from the Mark Rothko paintings, you know, the color fields.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so there's obviously, look, I don't think Jason sees it that way, but there's definitely some. When you start talking about meditation and color and shapes and forms and spirituality, you do think Mark Rothko a little bit.
Who also had a chapel or a church at some point.
Yeah, the church.
Which is, yeah.
Exactly.
Really...
So, yeah, exactly. It resonates with that. I also mentioned, and this is where the art history comes out. So we also talk about Manfred Moore, Francois Morellet, and Scott Daves as people whose work is like a precursor to what Jason does. And then we go all the way down. And obviously it ends with this piece, which I really like, although my personal favorite is this one. No.
Oh, cool.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, no, the work is very interesting, very beautiful indeed.
I liked this exhibition because it was very... It was like a palate cleanser in a way, you know?
Yeah.
We've had like so many heavy things happening that I thought let's start the year with something. Well, start the year, it took till March. But let's start the year with a exhibition that just lets you look at it and immerse yourself in it and forget about all the tense and stressful things of day-to-day life, right? So that's why I chose Jason's work. This is Jason himself. He's actually in New Haven, Connecticut, so he was close to when I was doing the Emerald. I just didn't know him back then. Well, I did know him because of his Instagram, which I recommend you follow. He has some really interesting work. And this is the banner, which I'm also really proud about it. The Instagram thing. Anyhow, and this new work, I really like it, and I would have liked to have it available when I was creating this show. But anyhow, so yeah, if you have time, go visit our exhibition. And I think that's pretty much it for today. I think, do you have anything else you want to add, Constanza?
No, that's good.
All right then. Well, thank you for being here. Remember to like and subscribe. Yes, I have to do this. And don't miss the next one whenever we actually manage to make the new podcast.
Yes, thank you everyone for tuning in.
All right then. So thank you, Constanza, and